Imagine an entity weighing over 250 tons, measuring 63 meters in length, and equipped with the most advanced communication systems humanity has ever created. A Boeing 777 with triple redundancy for every critical function is not something that can simply vanish into thin air. But on a night in March 2014, that impossible became a grim reality. At 1:21 a.m., the plane suddenly vanished, as if someone had just switched off the lights on the world's screens. No distress signal, no sign of trouble, only a chilling silence. The biggest question of the 21st century begins at this very moment. Where did those 239 people go? It all began like the most ordinary scenario you could imagine. It was a routine night flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, carrying 239 people from 14 countries. Among them were engineers on a business trip, passionate artists, elderly couples, and young families. 3 young children, the youngest only 2 years old, had fallen asleep in their parents' arms. They believed that after a long sleep of about 5 to 6 hours, the sunrise in Beijing would greet them. They had no idea that, for them, that sunrise would never appear, and this journey would continue forever into a realm of space yet unreachable by science. 38 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft reached a stable altitude and was preparing to be handed over to the next control tower. A short, familiar greeting echoed from the cockpit, "Good night, Mh370." At 1:21 a.m., the plane officially disappeared from the control screens. It didn't crash or show any signs of a sudden collision. It simply vanished, as if someone had just shut down the entire display system. Strangely, during that entire moment, no distress signals were sent, no emergency codes were displayed, and not a single word from the cockpit warning of a technical malfunction. This disappearance occurred because the automatic system transmitting position and altitude information to the ground had been disabled. While disabling the first system required a simple flip of a switch in the cockpit, the second system, which sends engine status data, required a much more complex procedure. To disable this system, someone had to go down to the technical area under the cockpit and disconnect specific wiring. These 2 completely independent communication systems went silent almost simultaneously, a coincidence that, theoretically, would be extremely unlikely without direct intervention from someone with extensive knowledge of aircraft operation. Immediately afterward, a chaotic coordination ensued between air traffic control centers. The Vietnamese side patiently waited for the aircraft to establish contact, while the Malaysian side believed the aircraft had been successfully handed over and was now within the control of their neighbor. Precious hours passed before both sides realized that the massive aircraft had lost contact with anyone. A massive search operation involving dozens of countries was immediately launched in the South China Sea. They scoured every square meter of water for debris, oil slicks, or any sign of life, but the results were a resounding zero. While officials held press conferences with empty promises, the truth was they had no idea what had happened. It was one of the biggest failures in communications and crisis management, with no one able to explain why a Boeing 777 could simply vanish into thin air. But just as the world was staring intently at the South China Sea, data from secret military radar emerged and overturned all calculations. It showed that the plane hadn't remained at the bottom of the sea, but had undertaken a journey no one could have predicted. While search teams were still meticulously scouring every square meter of the South China Sea, a horrifying truth quietly emerged from Malaysian military radar recordings. This wasn't civilian radar based on voluntary aircraft signals, but combat radar capable of detecting any large metallic objects in the sky. The data showed that after disappearing from civilian screens, the plane didn't crash into the sea. It made a sharp turn, flying back across the entire Malay Peninsula from east to west and heading straight into the Strait of Malacca. The Boeing 777 was now flying in the exact opposite direction of Beijing, passing very close to the capital from which it had taken off just an hour earlier. Military radar exists for a single purpose: to detect and respond to unidentified objects entering airspace without permission. A huge passenger plane flying without communication at night is precisely the kind of situation air defense forces are always on high alert. However, the truth is that no fighter jets were scrambled. No attempt to establish visual contact was made. Those responsible watched the mysterious black dot move across the screen and simply let it disappear from sight without taking any action. If a timely response had taken place, perhaps history would not have recorded a mystery that lasted 11 years, and the fate of 239 lives could have been saved. After leaving the last remaining military radar coverage, the aircraft entered a completely dark region of the world. From this moment, it was no longer under the control of any human surveillance system, with no communication and no imagery. But that wasn't the end. A silent and somber 7-hour journey began, taking the aircraft to one of the most desolate places on the planet. This was a period erased from its normal operational history, where only darkness and faint electronic echoes sent into space were the sole evidence of its existence. Even though the aircraft had deliberately cut off all normal communication, there was still an invisible link that the pilot may have overlooked. Each Boeing 777 has an automatic satellite antenna that sends out short, periodic signals to confirm the equipment is still operational, like a silent electronic pulse saying, "I'm still here." By measuring the travel time of each of these signals, engineers at the satellite company performed a mathematical feat. They calculated the distance from the aircraft to the satellite at each moment. A total of 7 such signals were recorded after the plane disappeared from radar, with the last one appearing 7 hours later. This data generated 2 possible trajectories, one toward Central Asia and one toward the southern Indian Ocean. Since none of the military radar systems of the northern countries detected the unidentified object, a southward trajectory became the only remaining hypothesis. The plane was now heading straight for one of the most desolate places on our planet. This was an area of the ocean up to 5 kilometers deep, where no ships regularly passed, no civilian air routes existed, and the nearest landmass was more than 1,000 kilometers away in every direction. Whoever was piloting the plane seemed to have deliberately chosen a destination where the truth would be most effectively concealed, where human search efforts would be futile amidst the vastness of nature. The biggest question remains behind the cockpit door. Who made those sharp turns, who cut off the communications, and who piloted this plane into the endless void for 7 hours? These actions required extremely skillful engineering and a deep understanding of the blind spots in the ground monitoring system. Throughout those 7 hours of flight, the plane moved precisely, unlike a machine experiencing a technical malfunction or in free fall. The first hypothesis, a technical malfunction such as a fire or depressurization, could explain the communication disruption, but it completely contradicted the fact that the aircraft was still able to perform complex maneuvers and maintain a stable flight for many hours afterward. The second hypothesis of unauthorized passenger interference was quickly dismissed when the investigation confirmed that the most suspicious individuals were actually illegal immigrants, and no organization claimed responsibility or made any demands. Finally, attention focused on Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a highly experienced pilot. At his home, investigators found a flight simulator recording a virtual route toward the southern Indian Ocean, which almost perfectly matched what actually happened. While this was the most noteworthy piece of evidence, it was still indirect, as he was a well-liked colleague and friend, showing no signs of mental instability before boarding the plane. Throughout that 7-hour silent journey, the most haunting question was the fate of the 227 passengers on board. The most plausible and least worrisome scenario was a deliberate depressurization at an extreme altitude of 12 kilometers. At that altitude, the air is incredibly thin, and the lack of oxygen would cause a person to lose consciousness within seconds. Although oxygen masks automatically drop down, the supply only lasts for about 15 minutes. If the pressure is not restored, all passengers will fall into a deep, peaceful sleep without any pain or fear. The silence of the 227 people during the 7-hour flight is the most heartbreaking evidence of this scenario. 7 hours after takeoff, as the last of its fuel reserves ran out, the satellite system recorded a final signal. It was the last electronic farewell before the massive aircraft completely left this world, sinking into eternal silence. It wasn't until a year and a half later, in July 2015, that the ocean began to reveal the first clues at the remote island of Reunion. Examination confirmed that the barnacle-covered wing fragment was indeed part of the missing aircraft. More than 30 other pieces of debris, ranging from aircraft skins to interior trim, have been found along the African coast, thousands of kilometers from the expected crash site along ocean currents. The markings on the debris found in Tanzania indicate the plane crashed into the water at extremely high speed. This leads to two possibilities. Either the plane went into a free fall after running out of fuel, or someone retained control until the last minute to execute a steep crash to minimize the amount of debris floating on the water. If the second scenario is correct, it was a deliberate act intended to make the search as difficult as possible. The Australian government spent up to $200 million on an unprecedented underwater search operation. Specialized equipment scoured the seabed at depths of up to 5 kilometers, an environment where pressure can crush anything. Searching for a 60-meter-long object in these conditions was like trying to find a coin in a vast field at night with a small flashlight. Hundreds of false alarms occurred when rocks or solidified lava flows appeared on sonar screens, offering hope only to extinguish it shortly afterward. Before this search, the seabed in that area was a blank space on the geographical map. In reality, the underwater terrain here is just as majestic and rugged as the Alps on land. The plane may have been buried by sediment, deep within a canyon, or obscured by coral reefs and marine life over the years. Even if we ever find the wreckage, the answers may still be out of reach. The batteries in the two black boxes expired more than a decade ago, and the immense pressure at the bottom of the ocean may have destroyed the precious recordings. We might only get 30 minutes of silence or data that has been erased by time and the ocean. Although the true cause remains shrouded in mystery, this event has forced the global aviation industry to implement groundbreaking changes. International aviation authorities have issued strict regulations. All passenger aircraft worldwide must now continuously transmit their position via satellite to ensure that no aircraft can disappear for hours at a time. Cockpit access procedures have been tightened, psychological screening of flight crews has been intensified, and coordination procedures between civilian and military air traffic controllers have been comprehensively updated. The tragic fate of 239 people has become a valuable lesson, contributing to the protection and saving of thousands of other lives in the future. For the families of the passengers, this is not simply a technical mystery or a news story. 11 years have passed without answers, without relics, and without a final farewell. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss, a painful state of limbo where loved ones cannot truly let go, but also cannot stop hoping. Every time a new piece of wreckage is found or a new theory emerges, their emotional wounds reopen, aching as intensely as they did in the beginning. The most haunting aspect of this story isn't the technical details, but the small glimpses of real life. It's about a mother in Beijing who persistently charges the phone her son left behind before his flight. It's about children growing up without a father who simply went away on business and never returned. Or somewhere in Australia, an elderly woman still regularly sets 2 seats on the breakfast table each morning, waiting for her husband who should have returned from his vacation 11 years ago. In the age of satellites and GPS, this disappearance reminds us of the limitations of technology and the vast indifferent nature of the ocean. We know far less about the seabed than we do about the surface of the moon. There are questions that will perhaps remain unanswered forever. Not because the truth doesn't exist, but because it lies dormant beneath millions of tons of water at a depth of 5 kilometers. 239 people boarded a routine night flight and became the greatest mystery of modern aviation history. Until the plane is found, this mystery will remain deep, silent, and without end.